Picture this, February 2022. A massive, intimidating line of heavy metal stretches for miles along a muddy road. Thousands of tanks and armored vehicles are rolling confidently forward. For decades, military doctrine dictated that massed armor was the unstoppable spearhead of any major ground offensive. The sheer psychological terror of a tank column was meant to break the defender's will before the first shot was even fired. But modern warfare had a brutal surprise waiting in the tree lines. The invading forces expected a quick, conventional victory. Instead, they drove headfirst into a technological buzzsaw. The era where thick steel plates guaranteed survival was about to end abruptly. Hidden in the bushes, small teams of infantry carried a green tube. That cost a fraction of a main battle tank, yet held the power to instantly vaporize it. This wasn't a fair fight anymore. The Goliath of traditional heavy armor was about to meet a very modern David. Enter the FGM-148 Javelin, a portable, fire-and-forget missile system that fundamentally altered the opening months of the conflict and shocked military planners worldwide. To understand why the Javelin is so terrifying, we have to look at how tanks are built. Tanks are like armored turtles. Their thickest shell is at the front to take direct hits. To counter traditional rockets, modern tanks wear explosive reactive armor, or ERA, blocks of explosives on the outside that detonate outwards to deflect incoming projectiles. It's literally fighting fire with fire. But the Javelin doesn't play by the old rules. First, it has a tandem warhead. When it hits an ERA block, a small precursor charge triggers the reactive armor, clearing the path. A microsecond later, the main warhead punches through the newly exposed hull. But wait, it gets worse for the tank. Instead of hitting the thick front armor, the Javelin missile launches into the sky, arcs gracefully, and plunges straight down onto the top of the turret, the weakest, thinnest part of the turtle's shell. It's called a top attack. Once fired, the operator can immediately run away, while the missile's infrared seeker guides itself to the hot engine block. The result? Total devastation. The armored spearhead was blunted, proving infantry could hold the line. By the summer, the conflict shifted. The fast-moving armored pushes ground to a halt, replaced by a brutal, grinding artillery duel. Russia relied on its traditional doctrine, overwhelming mass. They fired tens of thousands of unguided artillery shells every single day, turning entire landscapes into cratered moonscapes. Ukraine was vastly outgunned. They couldn't match the sheer volume of fire. If they played the traditional numbers game, they would lose. They didn't need more shells. They needed absolute, surgical precision. They needed a way to reach far behind the front lines and sever the arteries of the enemy's war machine, the massive ammunition depots and command centers. The solution arrived on a remarkably normal-looking, fast-moving truck chassis, the M142 high-mobility artillery rocket system, universally known as HIMARS. It didn't look as intimidating as a giant tracked howitzer, but this wheeled vehicle brought a godlike capability to the battlefield. It could drive into a position, unleash hell with pinpoint accuracy, and drive away before the enemy's radar could even figure out what just happened. HIMARS isn't just a rocket launcher. It's a giant sniper rifle. It fires GMLRS rockets guided by GPS and inertial navigation, boasting a range of over 80 kilometers. You can type in the exact coordinates of an enemy ammunition dump sitting deep in the rear, press a button, and hit it within a margin of error of just a few meters. But the real nightmare is what's inside the warhead. Instead of a single massive explosion, some of these rockets carry a payload of 182.000 tiny tungsten fragments. When it detonates directly above a target, it unleashes a supersonic shotgun blast of indestructible metal that shreds unarmored trucks, radar dishes, and supply crates like paper. In a matter of weeks, massive supply depots miles behind the front line started spontaneously turning into spectacular fireworks displays. The invading forces had to move all their supplies out of HIMARS range, drastically stretching their logistics and slowing their advance to a crawl. Precision had defeated mass. The rules of engagement had shifted once again. As the war dragged into its second year, the front line solidified into massive networks of trenches, resembling a high-tech World War I. Artillery ammunition became scarce on both sides. The big, expensive weapons were heavily monitored. Soldiers needed something cheap, adaptable, and lethal. The answer didn't come from a multi-billion-dollar military-industrial complex. It came from consumer electronics and 3D printers. The first-person view, or FPV drone, originally built for civilian racing. These nimble quadcopters cost around $500. Enterprising soldiers started strapping half-kilogram explosives or RPG warheads to them. While military planners had previously seen the vulnerability of traditional armor to expensive, high-altitude drones in conflicts like Nagorno-Karabakh, no one anticipated this. This was the democratization of air support. A soldier sitting in a muddy trench wearing VR goggles could pilot a cheap plastic toy at 100 kilometers per hour, flying it through an open tank hatch or directly into a bunker window. It was terrifyingly personal. Let's pause and do the math for a second. A modern, heavily armored main battle tank costs upwards of $3 million to produce. Meanwhile, a skilled operator can completely destroy that expensive machine using a tiny $500 drone built from cheap plastic, zip ties, and a modified mortar shell. For traditional military planners, this equation represents an absolute, asymmetric economic nightmare. You are losing millions to a weapon that costs less than a smartphone. And it gets worse. Unlike a Javelin missile that fires in a straight or arcing path, an FPV drone doesn't even need a direct line of sight. A pilot can steer it through dense urban environments, fly it tightly around concrete buildings, or relentlessly chase fast-moving vehicles down winding rural roads. And most terrifyingly, it can simply loiter in the air, buzzing around the battlefield for minutes, patiently waiting to find the absolute perfect, most vulnerable angle to strike. The psychological impact of this invisible threat is immense, wearing down the mental endurance of even the most hardened veteran soldiers on the front lines. The constant, high-pitched mechanical buzzing sound in the sky serves as a grim reminder that a lethal explosive could instantly drop from directly above at any given moment. Because of their incredible maneuverability, traditional cover is practically useless. Infantry units can no longer safely hide in deep, winding trenches or heavily fortified bunkers. And heavily armored supply convoys and combat vehicles can no longer move safely across open terrain during the daylight without attracting a deadly mechanical swarm. What we are witnessing on this modern battlefield is a profound shift in military tactics. It is the terrifying, explosive birth of the drone swarm. To meet the demand, civilian workshops, hidden garages, and small tech hubs across the country began churning out tens of thousands of these kamikaze drones every single month. For the first time in history, the production of lethal air support had become decentralized and crowdsourced. Ordinary citizens were directly funding and building the war effort. As a result, the entire battlefield became completely saturated with these incredibly cheap, incredibly deadly mechanical eyes in the sky, watching every single movement. This ubiquitous surveillance fundamentally changed the rules of engagement, making traditional surprise attacks, stealth operations, and large-scale armored maneuvering practically impossible to execute without immediate detection. But in war, for every sword, a shield is forged. As FPV drones dominated the skies, the scramble for countermeasures began. The most visible, and frankly bizarre, were the cope cages. Massive metal grills and netting welded onto the tops of tanks, sometimes covering the entire vehicle like a moving chicken coop. They look ridiculous, but they are designed to trigger the drone's explosive charge before it touches the actual armor. However, the real battle moved to the invisible spectrum. Electronic warfare, or EW. If you can't shoot the drone down, you scramble its brain. Both sides began deploying massive jamming antennas and portable backpack jammers. These devices flood specific radio frequencies with noise, cutting off the connection between the pilot's controller and the drone. When a drone hits a jamming bubble, its video feed turns to static, and it drops out of the sky like a stone. It's a relentless, invisible cat and mouse game of changing frequencies and hacking software. So, is the tank dead? No, but the era of the tank as an invincible, standalone king of the battlefield is over. This conflict has violently forced military doctrine into the 21st century. The new holy trinity of warfare is no longer just infantry, armor, and artillery. It is now infantry, precision-guided munitions, and ubiquitous drone swarms, all fighting under an umbrella of electronic warfare. The Javelin proved that smart missiles can stop heavy armor. HIMARS proved that precise logistic strikes matter more than blind artillery barrages. And the FPV drone proved that cheap consumer tech can bleed a superpower dry. The battlefield has become transparent, incredibly lethal, and surprisingly cheap to dominate if you have the right technology. As military academies rewrite their textbooks, one thing is certain: the future of war won't just be fought by generals with maps, but by gamers with joysticks. And that is a terrifying new reality.